Hello, and thanks for having me. Usually when I give talks like this, I do it at audio conventions or at very packed audio rooms and discuss audio for audio people. Today I'm trying not to do so because I'm trying to also explain to other devs or other areas of game development why middleware is a good idea, but also how you can help your fellow audio person out, because usually that's not because it's necessarily a problem. The pipeline usually is like that, but usually we're kind of left behind, and with very little effort, audio can actually work much faster. In this case, I work on a really big MMO called PAX Day. This is not a talk about PAX Day, but it is the project that we will be showcasing. I'm not affiliated with Audiokinetic that makes the software we're going to be talking about. It's just because I like to use it, and I use it a lot. But briefly about myself, my name is Bjørn Jacobsen. My dad and mom gave me this Philips G7000 system back in '87, and I think they regret that very much because I kind of never looked back, and I was told many, many million times that you can never make a living off playing video games, but I kind of decided that I just wanted to make video games instead. It took me 20 years to get there, but it worked out in the end. And one of the things that I'm the most proud of, it's a little bit of a, not really humble brag, it's more like a pat on my own shoulder for myself, that this slide used to be empty when I was doing it at school, and this is how it's going. So I've worked on quite a few projects, and some really big ones, and for a very, very long time. If you know some of them, nice. The latest project that I'm working on is PAX Day. I'm the solo audio developer out of a 70-person development team. We're making an MMO, like, I don't know, 50 by 50 kilometer sized map, etc. It takes a while to do, but that's also why I'm going to do a systemic approach, where the first thing that I did when I started the project was to talk to the other developers, put Wwise into the project. Wwise is an audio middleware, if you're not familiar with it. Put it in and simply walk around the office and talk about what is it that you have that I need, and I want pretty much every variable in the game to be public and available for me to use. They always ask, typical stupid programmer question, what do you need it for? Well, I need it because then I can manipulate all sorts of things. And over the years, I've learned just to ask politely, I need this variable, I need you to send it to my system, and then I can use it for all sorts of purposes. I also have written not a book, but a master thesis that was recently published into a PhD, not by me, but one of the guys in Switzerland found that one of the theories that I had about something called the constant conversation in video games is something that was worth spending 6 years writing a PhD about. I have no idea why he wanted to do that, but I'm very honored to be featured in a PhD. Anyway, PAX Day. PAX Day is a big MMO. When I started the project, of course, I walked around the office and talked to various developers. There's the game core, there's the world, there was a weather system and something about time of day. There's the gameplay, combat, locomotion, and so on. And I started talking to the VFX guy doing the weather and asked very specifically, what do you have and what do you plan to have? Because the things that he have, I want those variables exposed so that I can use them right now. But the variables that he doesn't have yet, but that will come, I can still implement them into my system and do a prototype so that the second he turns it on, it will work. For example, time of day was not implemented back then, but I can easily make a system in Wwise that simply simulates that it sounds different at night than it does at day. And because that was told to me, then it's not something that comes as a surprise 2 weeks before the deadline that, oh, someone implemented time of day. So, and I hate clickers. This is the typical conversation between Wwise and the entire system. We'll be talking about the weather system today, because that's what I want to show. There is a weather manager in the game. There is biome information about where we are, forest, grassland, hilltops, etc., barren countryside, and coordinates about where we are, because I want it. That's a quite easy thing to implement. You just simply take this is Unreal, so I don't remember if it's Y or X or whatever, but it's one of them. And take that variable, how high up are you? So if you're in a forest, but you're really high up on a mountain, the birds sound different than if you're down below. So all these coordinates, variables, and so on are sent to our system. The weather manager picks up wind, rain, humidity, clouds, the temperature, and of course, the wetness of the ground if it's been raining. I was told in the beginning, like I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, that why do you need the wetness? Well, that's because we want the footsteps to sound more wet after it has been raining. And the time of day as well is a thing that you can plop into this. All these things didn't work when I was working on the project at first. Sure, there was some sort of prototype, but because I have Wwise, because I know exactly how I want it to sound in the end, this is something that I knew that I would want to work in the long run. So this weather manager here, this is just a node in Unreal that's called the weather manager, and it gives you all these variables. Let's say wind has a value from 0 to 100. I send that value to Wwise, my audio system. And this is really blurry, and this screen is gigantic, and it's a different kind of stage than normal, but it simply just tracks and makes these stages, sets a switch, determining how does this wind sound. Now, this, if you're not familiar with Wwise, this is a standard way to set up a parameter into a switch system so that it just knows what to call the current switch out of a given variable. So we have calm, breeze, medium, heavy, and storm weather. And we send that back to Wwise to tell it what to do with it. The same thing goes for rain, but also the wind types, as we just mentioned. We also have the rain types, depending on how much it's raining and so on. There wasn't any rain, there wasn't any wind in the game when I was working on it in the beginning, but we knew it was coming, so I might as well implement these. Altitude. If you're in a valley, the birds sound a little different. Probably the weather sounds a little more damp than others and a little more clamped, and everything's real mushy. And if you're high up on a mountaintop, it's different. The temperature of the game, if it's really sunny and really breezy, then we want it to sound warmer than else. I have given a similar talk before and was told that, oh, this is super detailed, and why do you go this much in depth, and so on. And I don't think this is super detailed, to be honest. I think this is a weather system that's made the way a weather system should sound, because I wanted it to be a realistic experience. And when I say realistic, in video games, nothing is realistic. I'm talking about perceived realism and has nothing in relation to actual realism. But when you combine all these, we can combine all the variables that we have. For example, in this case, the rain amount makes sure that if it's raining, you hear the rain. And I hope that we can have an audio example afterwards. The rain will make sure that the rest of everything else sounds a little bit more down, so that the mix is sort of like live, because as soon as the player starts playing the game, I have no control whatsoever over what the player is going to do. What does this random weather system actually do? And what if the player goes somewhere where I'm unprepared for, and so on? So I need to be prepared for every possible combination scenario. This here is rain amount, and as you can see, if the value goes up, the voice volume of the birds goes down. The same if it's windy, then it goes down. This here is what if you're in a specific area location, you can set these individually for each. So I think this here is for the barren landscape, that if you're high up, the line in the middle is if you're at ground level. If you go up high, Some things are toned down. If you go into a valley, other things are toned down, and it's toned down differently so that the whole thing becomes like a living thing as it's moving about. And you can combine all these in multiple ways. This is just grassland birds when it's in the morning, and it can look different if it's the birds that's during the day, and so on. And you don't ever in real life want to look at parameters like this in combination. It's just there for the sake of the picture so that we can see how all these affect each other. And here's a list of everything that I have for whenever we're in our ambient environment, the altitude of the system as mentioned before, how many animals are nearby, how deep are you into a certain biome. So the birds sound different if you're deep into a forest rather than if you're just at the verge or the beginning of a forest. The whole point of that being is that I don't know where these biomes starts and stops because all of this is generated material. I do know sort of things where they are, but what if the player plants a million trees, suddenly there's a forest where there wasn't a forest before, and so on and so on. So I kind of need to know just how far away from the border of a certain biome are we? How many clouds are there? The reason why for clouds and also the light count is that what if you look into the sun, the sound should be muffled slightly. And it might sound like a weird detail to have, but it makes it really alive when you're walking about and looking up into the sun. All these values for every type of area. This is just for the barren environment. There's dawn, dusk, midday, morning, and in the middle of the night. There's specific birds for each and every biome and everything. Some of them are reused, of course, but they are treated differently across all these biomes. So we switch all these back and forth. And these are the forest creatures during the day. They play a certain type of grasshoppers. There's some random birds, random wings, and so on. And this is what makes the forest really sound like one type of forest. But if it's a different type of forest with different birds, or it's more haunted, it's more fairy tale-like, we can just replace these in its specific hierarchy, and then they sound different, and it sounds like a different forest. You can even add or remove content on the go. Not on the go, but as we want them to be. So playing the game, just running through in a debug session, running around all the different biomes, we can sort of figure out, oh, we need more birds when we're here. And then we run up a mountain, oh, we're in the same biome, but up top. We want these birds to be quiet. You can do so on the fly. So let's take a look at the project. And this is where I really hope that this works. This is a AAA size Wwise project done by me, and it's taken 5 years to make this project. Let's see, under audio. Does it work? It does. And the screen in the resolution is really small. Anyway, here are the ambient beds. Hopefully, oh, it does. This is the forest. What if we're in a different type of forest or swampy area? All these birds are fake, by the way. They are me saying weird shit into my microphone and pitching it up and down. It's really fun because I had time to do so. What you do is that you find recordings of actual birds and you pitch them down and they say instead of high stuff. And you mimic that and then you pitch it back up. It won't fool some fanatic bird fascist, but it works, it does the trick. And I'm pretty sure most can't tell the difference, especially when it's not swamped in reverb and all these sorts of things. This is a swamp. We also have wetlands, windswept, the barren landscape, where there's nothing. The cool thing is that before any of this actually worked in the game, it is possible for me to manipulate all these the screen is really small, but anyway, all my variables are down here on the right, and we can manipulate these so that all these things start to work, and I can check out how do they work in relation to one another. So as soon as the VFX artist plugs in the rain system or the wind system or whatever, it will start to work, because then my system is ready for it. And usually audio isn't ready for what's coming. It's usually audio that's being told. True story, 2 days before release, please redo the trailer. And I'm trying to avoid that so that I'm a little bit ahead of time, so that I also have time to see my kids for a change. What we're going to do is that we're going to open up a session here. We're going to set various scenarios. This is grassland, and we're going to set it to midday, and we're not deep into the biome, and it's not raining, it's not windy or anything like that. And I don't know how loud it is out there, but I hope you can hear it. If we walk into this biome, there are more birds. These birds are, of course, this is mixed for a different type of setup than a rock star stage type stadium where I'm supposed to give a rock concert. So this is more for computer speakers or a 7.1 proper setup, but hopefully it makes a point. Here we are. We can turn on the wind and we can turn on the rain. If it starts to rain, the birds will go away, but you will start to hear the rain. I have this really cool gimmick here where if the thunder is really close, then that's one way of doing it. But what if it's really far away, and this is the biome that you're in, then that's the lightning. This can be procedurally generated depending on what type of system you're in. And hopefully it sounds like an actual midday forest where it's kind of raining to you. So we can stand out here. The system's lagging because this hard drive isn't fast enough when you're prototyping, but we can also start walking with footsteps. Of course, in the game, all these variables combine to one another, and the wetness of the ground is automatic. Here I manually have to set it, but we're proving a point afterwards. So let's say if the deer rain and wind would stop for a moment. I'm wearing armor, and if the ground becomes wet, oh wait, hang on. So because it was raining, the game will consider the ground to be wet. So I'm just walking normally, but because it's been raining, the ground wetness value goes up. And once it goes dry again. All this is done before there even was a game to plug this into. I also had some concept art, and I could walk around the game, but because I know exactly what I want, because I know exactly which parameters I will get in terms of rain, the thunder, the wind, the rain, and all these things, then I am able to set this up, and then again, saying it for the 9th time, if once the VFX artist plugs this in, my system is ready, and then it just works. Famous last words. It kind of just works. So of course there needs to be polish, and you need to do stuff, but the point is just that I'm more prepared than if I hadn't done all this previously. If we change our biome from this nice grassy field here to a forest, where's the forest? Slightly different birds, slightly different insects, because we're in a forest, and we're probably treading on, it's a pine forest. So now our footsteps sound like pine when we're walking on it, and pine sounds different than other types of forests and so on. It may be a ton of details, but because of Unreal's new way of treating audio when you're using Wwise, then everything is loaded into separate sound banks so that nothing is loaded except if you need it. So even if I have, that siren is not part of the game, by the way. Even if I have 4 gigabytes of audio plugged into this game already, I am at no point using more than 18 megabytes of memory at any given point. When you mention that to a build engineer, they clap their hands and they want to shake it and they want to party because they are used to sound banks that are extremely huge. But because Unreal does a really good job at this, together with Wwise, then my memory footprint is not bigger than that, if 18 to 20 megabytes at any given point. And since this is a game for PC and console, or at least PC to begin with, then that's a really nice thing. What if we change the time of day? So the game just knows where we are, what's happening, what's going on, etc., and all these things. What my point again was that I was prepared when this was going in. Currently there are some weather system stuff that is not in, and other things are in. But again, the point is, as soon as they plug it in, I'm ready for it. The thunder that you heard before isn't into the game. It's something that was there, but it's not in right now. But you heard it work. So if the thunder is in the distance, the game will know, and my system will know, so it'll just play as it should. And there's a fly here, nice. All right, that's enough of birds that are technically me. So our biome type defines the primary setup of everything that's in there. Let's say grassland. And the time of day is daytime. That was the one that you heard before. That generates 3D sounds, the core ambience, and the birds that we hear, and insects and whatnot. All these are random, so the system, it will never sound the same. Well, technically, if you play the game for 25,000 years, maybe it will, but it won't repeat, and it will never sound like a repetitive process to the player. The weather manager takes care of wind and rain. If the rain value goes up, the bird's volume goes down. The same with the wind and so on. The rain affects the ground wetness, which affects my footsteps and so on. Which is a very nice feature because it just makes it much more immersive if you're running around the game and everything just suddenly sounds wet, and every material has a customized sound for everything like that. And I can do that without having a massive footprint in terms of it. One of the things about when giving talks like these is that it goes way faster than was anticipated. So I would say that maybe we should go over to questions if anyone has any. Throw the microphone around. You're free to do birds if you want to. Just shout. The what? Yeah. It can't be.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the value is in between two states.
Yeah.
No, it can't be. But there is a crossfade timer. You can set the state to interpret what if it crosses the border. Then it takes 20 seconds to go into the other one. So you can't have light wind and suddenly it sounds like storm. The value will slightly go there. So nothing happens as sudden changes.
Right. And in the game it doesn't like just go up and down the wind's value. It's based like on the game.
I would expect it to have a fluctuating value that's smooth. But even if it did change very fast, I have told my variable to only be perceived that it only goes from one value to another over the course of 2 seconds. So even if it went from no wind to all of a sudden storm, that would take 2 seconds to get there. And every crossfade to there takes 10 seconds. So if the storm suddenly starts, you will still hear a storm coming smoothly.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Hi. Did you play the game before you start your this weather system?
I did. I did play it, and I looked at all the. Of course, I looked at the concept art, and then I looked at the game. There was a game to play. You could run around, but let's say not all pieces of clothing was available, and time of day wasn't available. But that was going to be a thing. I even have a certain cycle for it because I know that, let's say, the moon changes shape depending on if it's full moon or light moon. I even have that value because I just found it and put it back in. So because I have that value, if I don't need it, it doesn't do anything. Like, it doesn't take up memory, it doesn't take up CPU or anything like that. But the fact that I have the value, what if I want something specific to happen if it's full moon and you're playing the game at 12 p.m., very specifically your time and so on, then you can do something. It's just that the audio perspective would always be as many variables as possible, really. But I played the game, I saw all these things, and the most important thing I did was to reach out to every other developer involved and ask, what do you have, and what will you have? What do you actually want to have? And then show them examples of, if you give me this, I can make it sound like this, which also sort of pushed other developers into the direction of, it won't just look good, we can also make it sound good. Or a feature that they want to add, we can cooperate much easier that way, instead of me waiting for them to come to me, like I said, 2 weeks before the deadline. Oh, by the way, temperature is also in here. Like, sounds familiar for every developer? Yeah.
And another one question, where did you take audio sources?
The proper answer would be that I run around and do everything from scratch, but I don't have time to do that. I usually, I'm very picky about the sound libraries that I find. I don't like to buy huge general libraries that does things. I like to go onto asoundeffect.com or places like that, and then find, I don't know, Mike Torolainen, some guy up in Finland who has made very specific 50 recordings of waterfalls in Turku or something like that. And then you take that because that's exactly what I want. Then you know it's quality recordings of one thing. And it's not very expensive. All the footsteps are generated by buying a general footstep library made out of quality Foley content and then me adding details. That's usually where I get my stuff from. I did have an intern. It was a very valuable lesson for my intern at the studio. He wasn't necessarily working on PAX Day. He was just helping me out with content. And he, very typically brand new to the industry, said, oh, I will make rain. It'll cost 200 euros to make the setup. And he wanted to make this sponge, and it would rain down. The rain sounds really cool that he did. And he kept telling me that if I do this, I can have it ready in 2 months. Sure, whatever, deadline's on Friday, so knock yourself out. That was a very valuable lesson for all of us, that he expected to have almost like unlimited time and unlimited funding to do stuff. And if you want proper rain, you need to know your system, know your sources, and come up with something that's prototype-y, quality enough to work on Friday. You can always polish it later. And that's how I like to gather my sources. Yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
So by that, you know all the rain is in a basement somewhere in France. Combined with birds, that's me talking.
Amazing. What is the humidity parameter for? If you already have the wetness for the footsteps?
The which value?
The humidity.
The humidity.
Yeah.
The humidity is if the temperature goes up, but what if it's not very humid? Then insects don't play as often as if humidity's up. It's just a geeky way of trying to make the difference between moist and not moist swamps, if that ever comes into the game. But that's, like I said before, that I'm not using the humidity value for anything right now, but I have it. So if I want to do something about it, I can use it later. Instead of this being, I don't know, a private variable hidden somewhere in the game, I've just asked for everything to be made public and sent to the audio system. If I need it, cool. If I won't use it, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Do we have more questions?
Yeah. Hey, Gordon.
Hello, hello. Great talk. I'm always fascinated by audio, the amount of craft that goes into it. This is a question I'm sure you're going to maybe like or not like.
Sure.
Is it still, when I worked in games 200 years ago, it was often not right at the start. Is it still that way, or do you see a shift?
Oh, no, it's still that way.
Oh.
Okay, well, the sales pitch would be that audio is just as important as any other field in craft, and you should take a lesson. But it's not like that. As much as I also want audio to be part of pre-production and so on, sure, maybe we are slightly more involved than we used to be, but I also have to straight up admit that the game just isn't ready for audio for a very long time. That's why it's nice to prototype, because that saves me time when we get ready for audio. But audio is primarily a post-production polish thing that goes into it, unfortunately. So it might have changed a little bit than it was 20 years ago, also when I started. PS2, 2 megabytes of memory, that's awesome. Back then it was a different thing. It has changed a little bit, but in the overall it's not any different, I think.
How about reversing it so the audio generates the game?
I like that. I haven't tried it before, but I know Remedy did that quite a lot for Quantum Break and so on. They use Wise as well. Have audio, just, I don't know if they track frequencies, but just track volume of certain things and then have that generate the graphics that comes onto the ground. I said I hadn't done so. I actually have at one point, because I was discussing with an animator, what if we, instead of using the animation and it randomly flaps the wings of a bird, like your animation system actually, then what if we have an audio system that randomly triggers the flapping of wings every given certain amount of time, because then we can make the bird sound really good. Every time that sample is triggered, it triggers the wing flapping animation. I think a lot of people isn't using that, but it's a huge advantage if you actually start to do so. Or just general audio callbacks into the engine. Yeah, I think so.
Cool, interesting. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I gotta ask one question now that we have scared all the people in the park with the thunder previously. But your talk is focusing on Wwise, but of course the question is, what led you to take that as your tool of choice over all the other options on the market?
Because I'm really good at it, and because I know how it works, and it's fast for me to work it. It becomes a very creative environment for me because I know all the nooks and crannies of the tool. That means that I can do this system probably faster than someone who didn't have any experience with Wwise before. I don't consider Wwise to be the ultimate tool over the other tools on the market, but it's the tool that I've used the most. And if I had to get familiar with a different piece of middleware that would take me time as well, might block my creativity for a while. And I get really angry if my creativity is blocked. So, yeah. How did you like working on Dark, by the way?
Dark is great,
Yeah.
and Vlad is an amazing, amazing developer.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. My first one and only award for best audio, actually.
Yeah, nice.
That was nice.
Do we have more questions? Up there.
Thank you. Hello, sorry, I wasn't from the beginning, but
Oh.
I am also interested in sounds and device. And my question is, like, whether sounds are usually like tied to the environment sounds, and while layering all these sounds, while sending all these RTPCs, how do you ensure that all this mix, all these winds, thunderbolts, rain, they complement each other, and you focus on like sound which you want? How do you mix it, or how do you prioritize the sounds over each other?
I play the game a lot and then run around in different scenarios and so on. The thing about self-QA like that is that you can debug and QA your game for 200 years, and when the game has been out for 5 minutes, some player will fuck it up and do something else that you're unprepared for. But I played the game a lot, and I tried every scenario. What if it's raining in the desert? Like, literally, it won't, but what if it does? What if all these variables come in like that? And then I have a very, very strict limitation system, both on the engine side. So if there's 50 deers close to you, you will only hear 2 of them, and so on. But also internally in Wwise, only the closest one is ever audible, and only the 5 most prioritized ones are ever audible, and so on. So even if 100 sounds could play at a given time, only like 25 are allowed to play, and only within the closest parameter of where you are. It becomes a little bit hairy when you want to control all that, but it's also necessary for this type of system because it could quite quickly sounds like a huge mishmash of everything that's going on. And then it's also super counter-immersive if, let's say, if the rain sound didn't duck the bird sounds. The sound of rain and birds doesn't go well with human brains. So it's very important to just run through the game and make sure that every scenario has been tested properly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else? Then, super important quote from some expert. And if you ever want to reach out, go ahead. I have no idea what my Xbox name is because my daughter used my credit card to change the login name of my gamer tag, so it's probably Olivia something. I have no idea what it is. It used to be Cujo Sound. It's not anymore. So if you're ever in the Copenhagen area, come by the studio. It'll be fun. I have beer in the fridge. Yeah. Thanks for having me.